People walk past the quiet ones every day, never realizing the secrets buried behind a tired smile. At St. Jude Medical, one unassuming ER nurse swallowed the daily insults of arrogant doctors. They thought she was nobody. They were dead wrong, and finding out nearly cost them their lives. Samantha Hayes was the kind of woman who blended effortlessly into the sterile, fluorescent-lit background of the St. Jude Medical Center emergency room. At 34 years old, she wore her faded blue scrubs like a meticulously crafted disguise. Her dirty blonde hair was perpetually pulled back into a tight, utilitarian bun, and her voice rarely rose above a calm, measured murmur. To the bustling staff of the Chicago hospital, Samantha was just another competent set of hands, reliable, unremarkable, and entirely expendable. No one paid attention to the way her eyes constantly scanned the room, unconsciously tracking the exits and calculating the shortest path to safety. No one noticed that she never stood with her back to the main triage doors, or that her hands possessed a freakish, almost mechanical steadiness during the most gruesome traumas. Dr. Ryan Lawson certainly never noticed. Lawson was a newly minted attending physician who walked through the ER with the swagger of a man who believed his medical degree conferred absolute royalty. He was handsome, heavily gelled, and ruthlessly ambitious. He also had a dangerous habit of cracking under intense pressure, a flaw he expertly masked by shifting blame onto his nursing staff. Samantha, being the quietest, was his favorite target. It was a grueling Tuesday evening when the dynamic between them finally snapped. Paramedics rolled in a 50-year-old male clutching his chest, his skin a terrifying shade of ash. The monitors screamed as the patient went into ventricular fibrillation. "Start compressions," Lawson barked, his voice pitching an octave higher than normal. He fumbled with the defibrillator paddles, his hands visibly shaking. "Charge to 200. Someone push 1 milligram of epinephrine." Jessica Braddock, a junior nurse who looked up to Lawson with misplaced admiration, grabbed a syringe, pushing epinephrine. Samantha's eyes locked onto the vial Jessica had grabbed from the chaotic crash cart. It wasn't the standard 110,000 concentration used for cardiac arrest. In the frenzy, the pharmacy had stocked a 1:1,000 vial meant for anaphylaxis. Pushing that directly into the man's veins would be a catastrophic, fatal overload. Without a word, Samantha stepped forward. Her hand shot out, her grip like a steel vise clamping down on Jessica's wrist just as the needle pierced the IV port. "Hey!" Jessica yelped, stumbling back. "Wrong concentration," Samantha said, her voice ice-cold and entirely devoid of panic. She snatched the correct pre-filled syringe from the bottom drawer, attached it to the line, and pushed the medication. "Epi is in. Clear." Lawson shocked the patient. A tense moment passed before a normal sinus rhythm bloomed across the monitor. The patient took a ragged, sputtering breath. Instead of relief, Lawson's face flushed a deep, furious crimson. He waited until the patient was stabilized and wheeled up to the ICU before cornering Samantha in the break room. "Who do you think you are, Hayes?" Lawson hissed, slamming his clipboard onto the laminate table. "You physically assaulted a colleague in my trauma bay. You disrupted my code." Samantha calmly washed her hands at the small sink, methodically scrubbing between her fingers. "Nurse Braddock had the wrong concentration, Dr. Lawson. It would have killed him." "That is not your call to make," Lawson shouted, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You do not touch my staff, and you do not countermand my room. You are a glorified bedpan cleaner, Hayes. I don't care how long you've been here. I want you in Gregory Patterson's office tomorrow morning. We are going to discuss your insubordination." Samantha dried her hands, her expression completely unreadable. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, and didn't apologize. She just looked at Lawson with a gaze so hollow and penetrating that the doctor involuntarily took a half step backward. "I'll be there," she said softly, walking past him. The next morning, the disciplinary meeting was a masterclass in bureaucratic humiliation. Gregory Patterson, the hospital administrator, sat behind his mahogany desk, steepling his fingers, while Lawson sat beside him, looking smug. "Samantha," Patterson began, using his most condescending administrative tone. "Dr. Lawson has filed a formal grievance. This isn't the first time you've displayed a troubling lack of deference to the attending physicians. Looking at your file, you have 10 years of nursing experience, but there's a strange 5-year gap from 2015 to 2020. You claimed you were doing overseas contract work. Frankly, whatever lax, third world clinic you worked at didn't prepare you for the chain of command at a premier Chicago hospital. Samantha stared at the wall just above Patterson's head. She thought about the dusty valleys of the Helmand province. She thought about the back of the armored medevac Stryker, where she had performed emergency field amputations while mortar shells shook the earth. She thought about the classified JSOC, Joint Special Operations Command, extraction teams she had patched up under the Callsign, Whiskey Tango Overwatch. I understand, Samantha said smoothly, burying the memories deep down where they belonged. It won't happen again. Patterson smiled, a thin, oily gesture. Good. Because if it does, I won't hesitate to terminate your contract. Now, get back to the floor. You're on the weekend night shifts for the rest of the month. They thought they had broken her. They thought she was a meek, easily cowed woman who would now keep her head down and follow orders blindly. They had no idea that Samantha Hayes didn't fear them. She just didn't want to blow her cover. After returning from her last classified deployment, all she wanted was a quiet, anonymous life where nobody shot at her and nobody bled to death in her lap. But the universe, it seemed, had other plans. Friday night in the St. Jude ER started like any other weekend, a steady stream of intoxications, minor lacerations, and flu cases. A bitter November wind howled outside, rattling the thick glass doors of the ambulance bay. The clock on the wall read 11:42 p.m. Samantha was in the supply closet, taking inventory when the hospital's emergency radio crackled to life. The dispatcher's voice was laced with an uncharacteristic edge of panic. St. Jude, be advised. We have a code triage inbound. Multi-vehicle collision on Interstate 90, followed by a reported firefight. Several casualties. We are routing 3 criticals to your facility. 1 is a federal transport. Be advised, local PD is requesting immediate secure lockdown of your trauma wing upon arrival. ETA is 4 minutes. The ER erupted into organized chaos. Dr. Lawson, working the night shift to make up for a scheduling error, rushed out of the doctor's lounge looking pale. What did they mean? A firefight? He asked nobody in particular. Jessica Braddock was frantically laying out trauma gowns. I don't know, maybe a gang thing? Samantha didn't speak. She moved with terrifying efficiency, clearing trauma bays 1 and 2, unlocking the blood bank cooler, and prepping massive transfusion protocols. Her heart rate, which would normally spike in a civilian, settled into a slow, rhythmic, combat-ready beat. 4 minutes later, the double doors flew open. Paramedics rushed in with 3 gurneys. The first 2 held men wearing dark suits and tactical vests, both riddled with shrapnel and bleeding heavily. One of them, a broad-shouldered man with a badge clipped to his belt, grabbed Lawson by the collar as he was wheeled by. The prisoner, the federal marshal gasped, coughing up a fleck of blood. Keep him alive. If he dies, they win. Lawson looked terrified. He turned his attention to the 3rd gurney. The patient was handcuffed to the rails, wearing an orange jumpsuit. He was unconscious, suffering from a severe gunshot wound to the abdomen. Get him into trauma 1, Lawson yelled, his voice cracking. Braddock, Hayes, with me. They transferred the prisoner to the bed. Lawson began shouting orders, struggling to find the source of the bleeding. Samantha moved instinctively, applying combat gauze and pressure to the wound, her hands coated in crimson. Outside the glass walls of the trauma bay, the ER waiting room was still packed with the usual Friday night crowd. But as Samantha glanced up to check the monitors, her eyes caught movement by the main entrance. 4 men had just walked through the sliding automatic doors. They wore civilian clothes, heavy winter jackets, jeans, and beanies. To a civilian like Lawson or Braddock, they looked like concerned family members rushing in after a crash. But Samantha didn't see civilians. She saw the fatal funnel. She saw the way the 4 men immediately fanned out, clearing their corners. She saw the heavy, rigid way they walked the unmistakable gait of men carrying concealed, heavy-caliber weaponry under their coats. She saw the thick, reinforced soles of tactical boots. The lead man, a scarred individual with cold, dead eyes, locked onto the triage desk and gave a subtle 2-finger hand signal to the man on his right. Cartel, Samantha thought, her mind flashing through threat assessments. Or highly paid mercenaries. They're here to finish the job. Dr. Lawson, Samantha said, her voice dropping to a low, urgent whisper. We need to initiate a code silver. Right now. We need to lock the blast doors. Lawson was elbow deep in bloody gauze, panicking as the prisoner's blood pressure plummeted. What the hell are you talking about, Hayes? Hand me the clamping forceps. Look at the lobby, Samantha urged, stepping back from the table and grabbing Lawson's shoulder. Those 4 men. They aren't family. They're a hit squad. They are about to take this ER. Lawson violently shrugged her hand off. Have you lost your damn mind? They're just people. Stop being hysterical and do your job, or I swear to God I will fire you right here, right now. Samantha looked at Lawson, then at Jessica, who was trembling, holding a bag of saline. I'm sorry, Samantha said softly. For what? Lawson snapped. Before he could react, Samantha slammed her hand into the emergency lockdown button on the wall of Trauma 1.